So I was debating on whether or not to make a COVID-19 video about this particular subject, but I think it's appropriate, so I'm going to go with it. We have just completed our first week of self-quarantine. Last week, Friday night, well, I guess it would be 2 weeks ago Friday night, we got a phone call from my older son's employer. He's the only one out of the house, still leaving the house every day to go to work. I've been furloughed as an unnecessary job. My wife's been working from home, and our younger son is one of the students here in Michigan who is not going to complete the school year at the school building. He's been doing online learning since March. They've decided not to reopen the schools in Michigan this year, or at least for this school year, maybe next school year. Let's see how this turns out. So the only one of us going out on a daily basis to go to work was my older son, and somebody he worked with tested positive for COVID-19. So all the people at work got a phone call Friday night saying don't come in for 2 weeks. Since it was a Friday night, we didn't call the family doctor because they're going to be closed. We're not going to call the hospital emergency room or anything else like that. We already had a self-quarantine plan in place, and we had verified it with one of the other family doctors that we have at the beginning of this situation, when we started changing our plans for bugging in. Being preppers, we already had some things in place to be able to withstand certain events, to be able to bug in or bug out, mostly bug in. And it really wasn't that difficult to change our plans a little bit, pick up the pace on a few things, and make some inquiries. We had a family meeting at the beginning of this, and we already knew what we were going to do if anybody showed any symptoms, or if anybody found out that they were exposed to somebody who had tested positive. And even though the situation seems to have changed on a weekly, sometimes even daily basis, that plan is working, and we're just going to follow through with it. Now, I will say it's been a week. Nobody has shown any symptoms. We all feel fine. I doubt any of us even have it. But why not err on the side of caution? The most we've done is I've gone out to the mailbox 3 times. That's it. We've stayed on our property line, mostly indoors because the weather has been bad. We've had snow this week. It's April and it's snowing in Michigan. But when the weather has been nice, we have been outside some. The biggest thing for us right now isn't a fear of dying, because we're all in fairly good health, and quite frankly, driving to work, we can get killed in a car accident. So we're not going to go out of our way to try to live a hazardous life, but life happens, and I'm not gonna live my life in fear because of what's going on. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to take what I consider reasonable precautions, or ask the family to take reasonable precautions. And each week we had done more and more and more to try to follow the order better, or to make our own plans, which in my opinion are better than the government guidelines, or ahead of the government. I've been ahead of what the government has said every single time so far, or at least our family has, because we're following our plan and we're making our own decisions. Now, you can't count on everybody else to be that forward thinking or that responsible. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back either. I'm just saying, if I'm this stupid and I can do this, anybody can. But there are lots of irresponsible people out there. And I think our government hasn't been as transparent with us as they should be. And I also think our government is doing some fear mongering. But I also wonder if they're doing it because so many people are openly defying this. I don't like that our doctors have this much influence over the government. And I don't like the fact that our government has sort of trampled on our civil liberties to some extent. I'm okay with putting some on the shelf here and there, temporarily, up to a point. But in some ways, some things have been a little bit, they're not logical. Some of the things that are done make sense and some don't. And the things that don't make sense, I cannot get behind. I also cannot get behind the people that are openly defying this. I am for people protesting. But then there's other things about how people go about protesting that I'm just not going to get behind. It's really not much different than going to a Second Amendment rally. So we've been doing our best, not only to talk the talk, but walk the walk. And it hasn't been that difficult to be self-quarantined. Even if we were sick The only reason we're going to leave the house is if we have to call an ambulance because somebody's symptoms have gotten so bad they have to go to the emergency and be admitted to an ICU. Otherwise, we would just push through it and, stay in contact with our doctor remotely. That's it. So we have plenty of supplies, but during this time, I've made arrangements for a grocery store delivery, which we've never done before. And I don't even think we're going to have to use it. By the end of the next week, we should be out of this self-quarantine, and the very first thing I'm going to do is go to the grocery store. But because we got the news on a Friday night, we're going to wait until next Saturday. It's Saturday right now, so it's been 7.5 days. So we're going to make sure that we are in the house for a minimum of 14 days, and everything's going to be just fine. And if we do get sick, we'll contact a doctor. If any of us show any symptoms, we're going to contact one or both of the family doctors and see what they say. Do they want us to come in for testing? Do they want us in a mobile unit out to us? Do they want us to go to drive-through testing? Do they want us to just tough it out? Whatever it is, we're going to go with that. If they say you need to extend the quarantine 2 additional weeks, then I will have groceries delivered at that point. But it's really not that difficult if you've already been prepared or you've already been thinking ahead to be able to deal with this sort of thing. It's just a lot to ask for most people. And I got to tell you, the very first thing I felt after we got that phone call wasn't a fear for the safety of my family. It was a feeling of being trapped, and I didn't like that feeling. It's not like I'm going out every day. It's not like I'm going places because I'm bored and I want something to do. Yes, we have walked the dog and maintained social distancing on the days where the weather's been nice. But during the first week of this quarantine, the weather's been bad for the most part anyhow, so we couldn't walk the dog if we wanted to, except maybe one day. And even if we, wanted to, we can't. We'll be just fine. The dog will be just fine. But otherwise, we were staying in as much as possible in order to comply with the order and do our part to help. But other people are not, and it's a shame. And I got to wonder how many people might have been exposed to somebody, knowingly been exposed, and they're not exercising self-quarantine. Or as soon as they got the feeling of dread, they ran out to the store or did whatever. Maybe that's part of the reason some of this is spreading, is because people know and they're still not being responsible. I can only speculate, but I can tell you that it's really not that difficult to do. It's not much different than before we were self-quarantining, and we're going to get through this. Everybody's going to get through this. But if you don't do your part, then it's just going to last longer. So I'm not going to say do your part and then I'm going to go out and do something else. I'm going to say do your part and I'm going to do my part. And that's really the gist of this video, is I'm not going to say it and not do it. I don't know about our politicians out there that are calling the shots, though. Are they really walking the walk, or are they just talking the talk? Thanks for listening.